Picture the cold you know, the kind that makes your fingers ache after 5 minutes outside, the kind you escape by walking into a heated room and forgetting about it within seconds. Now subtract 12 more degrees. Take away your house. Take away your jacket if you're wearing a synthetic one. Take away the grocery store, the furnace, the hospital 3 miles away. That was Europe 20,000 years ago. Scientists call it the Last Glacial Maximum. Global temperatures sat roughly 6 degrees Celsius colder than today. Ice sheets over 2 kilometers thick buried Canada, Scandinavia, and most of the British Isles. Sea levels dropped by about 120 meters, low enough to expose a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska that some researchers now call Beringia. Here's the disruption. Genetic studies published in the 1990s, later refined by researchers at Stanford, suggest the entire human species may have dropped to somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 breeding individuals during the coldest stretches. Not 40,000 in one region, possibly 40,000 on Earth. You are here, right now, because a small, freezing population of your ancestors didn't just endure that. They adapted to it, faster than biology alone could explain. And the way they did it will change how you think about what the human body, and the human mind, is actually built for. Let's start in a cave in southern Siberia. In 2008, archaeologists working in Denisova Cave uncovered something that looked almost too delicate to survive 40,000 years. A bone needle, less than a centimeter thick with a hand-drilled eye at one end. Not an awl, not a scraper, a sewing needle. That single object rewrote assumptions about Ice Age humans. It meant someone wasn't just wrapping animal hide around their body for warmth, they were tailoring it, fitting sleeves to arms, seams to shoulders, creating layered, wind-resistant clothing precise enough to trap body heat for hours in temperatures that could kill an unprotected person in under 30 minutes. Researchers estimate eyed needles like this one appeared across Eurasia between 40,000 and 45,000 years ago. Right around the time modern humans began pushing into colder latitudes, Neanderthals had occupied for over 200,000 years without ever developing the same technology. That's the strange part. Neanderthals had thicker builds, larger nasal cavities built for warming cold air, bodies that were, in many ways, better engineered for the cold than ours. But they were still gone by around 40,000 years ago. We weren't. The needle wasn't the only tool. It was a symptom of something bigger, a shift in how the human brain was solving problems. In 1985, at a site called Sungir, roughly 200 kilometers east of Moscow, Soviet archaeologists uncovered a double burial dated to about 34,000 years ago. Two adolescents, laid head-to-head, covered in over 10,000 mammoth ivory beads. Researchers later calculated that a single bead took around 45 minutes to carve by hand using stone tools. That means someone invested more than 7,500 hours, nearly a year of continuous labor, into objects with zero survival function. That's not what a species does when it's simply scraping by. That's what a species does when it has surplus time, surplus food, surplus social structure, stable enough to spend a year mourning instead of foraging. But here's where it gets stranger. Sungir sits north of the 55th parallel, genuinely brutal Ice Age territory. And yet isotope analysis of the bones showed a varied diet. Mammoth, reindeer, Arctic fox, even freshwater fish. These people weren't just surviving the cold. They were running a logistics operation across a frozen landscape, tracking migratory herds across hundreds of kilometers, predicting where mammoths would be months in advance. That kind of prediction required something else entirely: shared, encoded knowledge. Oral maps, passed down memory of migration routes spanning generations. Which brings us to fire, the one variable underneath all of it. Evidence of controlled fire use goes back over 300,000 years, long before the Ice Age peak. But, around 45,000 years ago, something changes in the archaeological record. Hearths become structured. At Denisova Cave in Greece, researchers found stone-lined fire pits reused repeatedly over generations. Not random campfires, but engineered, semi-permanent heat sources positioned to maximize warmth while minimizing fuel. Fuel in a landscape with almost no trees meant something unsettling: bone. Analysis of Ice Age hearths across Ukraine and Russia shows charred animal bone used as a primary fuel source, burning hot and slow once dried, in a treeless steppe where wood simply didn't exist for hundreds of kilometers in some regions. Humans weren't adapting to the environment anymore. They were re-engineering their immediate environment to survive one that should have killed them. Except there was a problem no amount of clothing, fire, or food logistics could solve: isolation. When ice sheets locked up the northern half of the planet, human populations didn't just get cold. They got cut off. Small bands, scattered across vast, hostile terrain, sometimes separated from the nearest other group by hundreds of kilometers of ice and tundra. In 2021, a genetic study led by researchers at the University of Bern examined ancient DNA from populations across Ice Age Europe. It found something researchers hadn't expected: mitochondrial lineages that vanished entirely around 14,500 years ago, right as the climate began to warm. Not because those groups died out from cold, because they'd become too isolated to exchange partners, and eventually too genetically thin to persist. Survival wasn't only physical, it was social. Groups that maintained contact, trading tools, sharing mates, passing routes and knowledge across bands, outlasted groups that didn't. Archaeologists have traced the movement of certain distinctive shell beads over 200 kilometers from their coastal origin, found in inland Ice Age camps. That's not an accident. That's a network. Evidence of humans deliberately maintaining ties across distance, in a world with every incentive to turn inward and hoard. The ones who reached out survived. The ones who didn't quietly disappeared from the genetic record. By around 19,000 years ago, the ice began its slow retreat. Temperatures crept upward over thousands of years, not overnight. And the humans who emerged from that bottleneck weren't the same as the ones who'd entered it. They carried tailored clothing, engineered fire, long-distance food logistics, symbolic burial, and, most critically, a hardwired instinct to stay socially connected even when isolation would have been easier. You inherited all of it, not as knowledge but as instinct. The reason you feel unsettled by prolonged isolation, the reason you crave connection even when you claim to want to be left alone, the reason your hands still know without being taught how to layer clothing against the cold. None of that came from comfort. It came from a species standing at the edge of extinction, in the dark, in the cold, choosing, again and again, to reach toward each other instead of away. That choice is still running in you.